Hey.
Hey.
Can I play?
No.
You nice?
Yeah, I'm nice.
All right. You and Kelvin against me and Jamal.
Oh, man, he is a girl.
Man, girls can't play no ball.
Ball better than you.
Love it. Welcome back to About That. So in case you didn't guess, we're going to talk now about some basketball news that's giving Canadian fans a pretty good reason to be excited. Toronto is going to host a WNBA preseason game, and this is huge for a city that really holds the sport close to its heart. And it's creating a lot of buzz because people are realizing what might be possible. And it's becoming clear that what seemed out of reach for so long feels so close. This moment has been years in the making, so we want to back up a bit and look at what led up to it. In June 2019, a group of Canadian tech entrepreneurs launches a bid to bring a WNBA team to Toronto. The league consists of 12 teams, all based in the US, so the prospect of a professional women's team coming to Canada is a big story for a major city obsessed with basketball, which was fresh off the Toronto Raptors championship. Media outlets run with it. Fast forward to March 2020, when WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert is just days away from announcing a preseason game will be played in Canada. But then, the COVID-19 pandemic strikes, and the game is canceled. It's a setback, but fans are still eager. Even Drake posted his support for a franchise on Instagram. Then, in May of 2022, just days before the WNBA season is set to kick off, Toronto Raptors president Masai Ujiri speaks about the city's bid for a team in a press conference, calling it a dream.
Our dreams, just like the Lakers now.
In case you're wondering what he meant there, Ujiri was making a joke about the Los Angeles Lakers, who tried to court Toronto Raptors head coach Nick Nurse earlier in the NBA season. Then in June, sports publication The Athletic reports that the league has given the check mark to both Toronto's infrastructure and capital needed to create a team. And then in Game 1 of the WNBA Finals, Cathy Engelbert announces that a preseason game will be coming to Canada in 2023.
I'm excited to announce the first ever preseason WNBA Canadian exhibition game, which will be held prior to next season.
But doesn't say where. And that brings us to January 2023, and the long-awaited confirmation that Toronto will host a preseason game on May 13th between the Minnesota Lynx and the Chicago Sky at Scotiabank Arena. Okay, so we know how we got here, but I still wanted to get a sense of what this would mean for Toronto and for Canada and for basketball, and what kind of chance the city actually has of landing a team. So to do that, I linked up with Savanna Hamilton. She's the Toronto Raptors sideline reporter for Sportsnet, and she also hosts a TV show covering news from the WNBA. Okay, Savanna, hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for having me.
So May 13th, the big game coming. How significant is this?
Mark it in your calendars now. It's one of those historic dates that's going to go down in Canadian sport history. Having a women's basketball game at the highest professional level come to Toronto is something that is just it's just phenomenal because, you know, it's so important for the next generation and future generations, both boys and girls, to see what, you know, professional women's sports look like up close and personal. So it's huge. It's everything.
So why Toronto? What is bringing the WNBA here?
Yeah, well, Toronto's a very exciting basketball market. I think you see it with the Raptors, of course, and just all the teams that it houses already, and just the fan support that really gets behind these groups, of course. But with the WNBA, like, it's always been one of those markets that have been highlighted just because, you know, it's a market that they feel could potentially sustain a team. I think that's, at the end of the day, it comes down to business and numbers, and would this be a profitable investment? And so with the WNBA, like, they want to look at factors that include, okay, what's the support level, what's even the sheer number of people that are interested in basketball in the city. And obviously with the Raptors' success and just what the Raptors have done, it speaks for itself. Like the numbers are great, and like the Scotiabank Arena is almost always sold out, whether it's the Leafs playing, the Raptors playing, or any professional sports team in the city. So then they think about that alongside other markets in the States, and they compare the two, and it has its own crowd. And I think back to when Duquesne played UConn in the Mattamy Athletic Center, and it was a sold out arena. And I know the Mattamy Athletic Center doesn't hold near as much as Scotiabank Arena, but you couldn't get a ticket. Like, I played on at the time, Ryerson, now Toronto Metropolitan University, on the women's basketball side of things. And so that was the only way that I was actually able to get to the game myself. And so all those little things factor in. And so that was almost like a mini test for this test. And so I think depending on the results of, how many people come out for this preseason game could be a sampler of potentially what we see in the future of maybe there's a franchise, maybe there's support, but either way, it's a great test.
Right. And so they're saying there's probably already a pretty good fan base there. When you look at the support there is, I think, across the board for women's sports here, like soccer is quite successful or hockey is quite successful. Do you think the WNBA would be looking at that and saying we can translate this into basketball? I mean, with sports that are different from each other, you almost got to do your own market test for each sport, because just because a city can be a hockey city or a soccer/football city doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a great basketball one. But I think what they definitely look at is, okay, well, there's so many basketball fans for the NBA, and then that must mean that there is crossover, because at the end of the day, yes, people can just be strictly NBA fans, but if you're a fan of basketball in general, then the genders don't necessarily matter. And not to mention just the sheer talent that's coming out of Toronto right now, especially in the GTA. You think about the players that are currently in the WNBA. We have Kia Nurse.
Rebound, Phoenix. They're off and running. They don't take a timeout. Nurse hits. Kia Nurse hits at the buzzer, and Phoenix wins.
She's maybe just outside of the GTA. She's in Hamilton. Then you have Nalia Chanwa.
Nalia Chanwa. Whoa! She is pumped, going for the and one.
Driving, spinning on Williams. Oh, what a find to Achanwa!
She's from Guelph. Then you have Bridget Carleton.
To 13 points after the first frame as Carleton attacks hard.
Collier has to give it up. Shot clock fading. The 2-for-1 goes by the wayside. Carleton on the reverse.
And that's also kind of in and around that GTA area as well. So it's kind of been that hotbed of talent, and you have to continue to think that okay, well, if all this talent is coming from this area of Southern Ontario, then maybe there's something to be said here. Maybe there's a lot of interest in women's basketball in this area. And having myself growing up and playing the sport, there's so many teams, tons of teams, tons of talent, tons of NCAA talent that don't quite make it to the WNBA, but they go on to play overseas and have great careers there too. And I think that's another thing, is that with expansion, you could foster more people coming up to the system, because right now, the reason why the WNBA is even looking at expanding, period, is just because there's almost too much talented women's basketball players and not enough teams to house them. Right now, they have been cutting some really talented players that have been on teams in the past. People are retiring maybe a little bit sooner than they'd like. Not to say that they didn't have to, but no one's forcing them. But at the same time, there's that argument of, well, are we making room for the next generation of talent? But that's not necessarily a problem in the NBA, because they have a lot of teams to support their league. So the reason why you think of the WNBA and how it comes full circle to the Toronto is that Toronto has been a hotbed of talent. Yes, even on the men's side, but especially on the women's side too. That goes to the to the NCAA and then funnels either overseas or to the WNBA. So of course, this is almost it fosters itself. It's almost like its own contained market. So if you have enough talent coming out of here, then you probably have a fair bit of fans that support the game here as well.
Right, and so the WNBA hasn't expanded since, I think, 2008. So what is it going to take for it to make that leap, to actually do that?
Well, at the end of the day, basketball is a business. Doesn't matter what gender it is, or doesn't matter what side of the sport it's on. and it has to make sure it makes sense in the books. Now, you could talk to all the experts and they could tell you like what's going on in the league currently. The players are currently still fighting for a lot of things that the NBA has, but not on the same level that people might misunderstand that. They're not asking to be paid, gazillions of dollars like, NBA players are making right now. They're just asking for like a very similar portion of the overall pie. If an NBA player is making, and this is just me making up the number right now off the top of my head, but if an NBA player is making about, say it's like 50% of the overall revenue that the team makes, then WNBA players are not making that same amount of revenue. They're making maybe like 20% of what the overall team makes. And so right now they're trying to get to that like portion, the same percentage number, not the same millions of dollars in number, but the same percentage in order for that like salary to be increased. But so in a sense, it's almost like and Kathy Engelbert has spoken on this right now. She's like, we need to foster growth and like making sure that our league is in a very stable position internally before we look to expand, because you don't want it to ultimately expand and then collapse.
Right, and so they are looking at a few cities, right? I think like Nashville, Portland, Philadelphia, Toronto's on that list. What do you think the chances are it could come to Toronto?
I mean, it's been a conversation for like a decade now. I do believe that it's a when, not an if. And I don't think it's necessarily going to happen in the immediate future. Like, I don't think, there's no one can declare what exact year the WNBA might build a franchise in Toronto. I would say that like there's probably is a better like market for basketball in Toronto, being the city that it is, being the fact that they really do come out and support the NBA teams and foster growth within the grassroots systems, than there might be in a Nashville. So it kind of just ranges, and ultimately that conversation comes back to investors, and I think that's kind of where the holdup is. It's who is going to take that jump, who is going to put their money where their mouth is and say, I'm taking this on, I'm going to bet on women, and like we're going to bring a franchise to Toronto. And there's been a number of groups that have kind of looked into the details of what that takes and what that entails. But now it's kind of coming to not just the money, but also the infrastructure and who's going to run it and so much other details that come with franchise. It's not like you could just snap your fingers and bring one. But as long as there's financial backing, then it's a when. And I do believe that the when is probably within this decade.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So it does come. Let's say it does. What do you think the team should be called?
Oh, I've thought about this so many times. Like I've honestly I don't really have a good name. I'm not necessarily a professional team marketer over here, but I think the Huskies could be cool.
Okay, the Toronto Huskies became a team in 1946, but they folded after just 1 year in the BAA. That's the Basketball Association of America, which would later become the NBA. The Huskies were Canada's first professional basketball team, and in 1995, when the NBA was moving to Toronto, they thought about reviving the team name. But as they were doing logos and design, they realized that it seemed too similar to Minnesota's NBA team, the Timberwolves. So they ruled it out. That is, of course, when the Raptors came into existence. But the Raptors still throw back to the Huskies every now and again with their retro jerseys.
Just like given the history of the Huskies with the Raptors, it's a unique name. There's not many teams that have that as a mascot, so you could definitely play into it. Anyways, there's lots of history with that name, so that's the first one that I think of. But at the same time, I'd be open to something completely different. I would just say stay away from, associating with like the NBA franchise here, the Raptors. Just make it its own thing. Like make it its standalone.
Stay away from dinosaurs.
Stay away from the dinosaurs. Like no, like I don't know, pterodactyls or something like that.
Cool uniforms, though, I'm sure. All right, Savanna Hamilton, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Welcome back. So I've got to say, the idea that a WNBA team could come to Canada is pretty cool, isn't it? And whether the expansion comes to Toronto or not, I think it might say something about how the way we view women's sports has been changing. We have, after all, seen a lot of developments in the last couple of years. In 2021, the WNBA had its most watched season since 2008. Viewership went up 51% year over year, and that's pretty big. ESPN averaged 1.2 million viewers a game during the Women's College World Series, that's softball, in 2021. And get this, 82 million people watched the 2019 Women's World Cup. That's almost 50 million more than 4 years earlier in 2015. So clearly, the viewers are showing up. So the expansion of women's sports kind of feels like the obvious move. I know I'm already excited for the Canadian Women's Professional Soccer League that will be launching in 2025. Thanks so much for watching About That. We will be back again tomorrow.